The HOA president unlocked my front door with a key I had never given her, waved 3 real estate agents into my foyer, and announced that the owner had already approved the sale. What she did not know was that I was sitting 12 feet away in a brown leather chair, drinking coffee beside a folder thick enough to ruin every career in the room. She smiled when she saw me, but only for about half a second. Then her face went still. My name is Grant Mercer, and for nearly 16 years I investigated property fraud for a title insurance company based in Fort Worth, which meant I had spent most of my adult life dealing with people who believed a confident voice and a clean blazer could turn a lie into legal ownership. I had seen forged deeds, fake liens, sham foreclosures, and families pushed out of homes they had paid for with 30 years of honest work. But until I moved to Willow Creek Preserve outside Georgetown, I had never watched someone try to steal a house one neighborhood fine at a time. I moved there with my daughter, Ellie, 3 years after my wife, Rebecca, died from a sudden stroke at 42. Ellie was 11 then, quiet, sharp, always carrying a sketchbook under one arm, and I was still trying to learn how to be 2 parents without looking like I was failing at both jobs. Our new place sat on 2 acres at the end of a curved road lined with limestone walls and pecan trees. A low ranch house with a metal roof, a wide porch, and an old red oak in the front yard that leaned slightly toward the west. Rebecca had once told me she wanted a house with a tree big enough to hang a swing from, so the first weekend after we moved in, Ellie and I tied a wooden swing to the lowest branch. It was not a grand memorial, just 2 ropes, 1 board, and a lot of silence between us. But it became the place where Ellie drew, where I drank coffee on Saturday mornings, and where the house slowly started to feel like ours. The president of the Willow Creek Preserve Homeowners Association was a woman named Marlene Voss, 56 years old, always dressed as if she might be photographed at a charity luncheon, even when she was checking trash cans at 7 in the morning. She drove a pearl-white Mercedes SUV, wore oversized sunglasses in cloudy weather, and carried a leather binder with the HOA crest embossed on the front like it contained launch codes. The first time I met her, she stood beside the community mailboxes and told me my property had excellent resale potential. Not hello. Not welcome to the neighborhood. Not how is your daughter settling in. Resale potential. She said her cousin owned a small investment group that specialized in helping families make clean transitions when a home became difficult to maintain. I told her I had no plans to sell. She gave me a smile so polished it almost reflected sunlight and said, "Plans change, Mr. Mercer." I remember watching her walk back to her Mercedes and thinking that was an odd thing to say to a man she had known for less than 3 minutes. The first fine arrived 2 months later, $300 for an unapproved porch light fixture. The fixture had been installed before I bought the house and appeared in the HOA-approved architectural photographs, but I paid it anyway, saved the receipt, and added the notice to a folder on my computer. The second fine came 3 weeks after that. $275 for improper gravel color along the side driveway. The gravel was the same pale limestone used throughout the neighborhood. I paid that one too. The third fine was for a basketball hoop we did not own. I emailed Marlene a photograph of my empty driveway and asked whether the invisible hoop was regulation height. She did not find that funny. Her response said the violation had been confirmed by a board representative and would remain on the account until formal review. That was when Ellie noticed something was wrong. She was sitting at the kitchen island, shading the roof of a house in her sketchbook, when she asked, "Why does that lady keep sending us bills?" I told her some people confuse being in charge of a committee with being in charge of everyone. Ellie looked at me and said, "Is she trying to make us leave? Children are good at saying the thing adults waste weeks avoiding." I told her no one was making us leave. Then I went into my office and started a second folder. I named it Voss. The first real estate agent showed up on a Saturday morning in June while Ellie and I were making pancakes. His name was Calvin Rusk, and he said Marlene had told him I was considering a quiet sale before the property reached the open market. He had 3 buyers ready, he said. All cash, no repairs, fast closing. I asked where he gotten permission to approach my daughter at the door before confirming an adult was home. His smile disappeared. Then I asked him to email me the written authorization Marlene claimed to have. He left without finishing his pitch. 9 days later, a second agent appeared, this one named Dana Pierce, who gave almost the same speech word for word. Pre-market opportunity, motivated owner, fast timeline, discreet handling through the HOA. When I told her the property was not for sale, she went pale and admitted Marlene had described the situation as already approved. 2 different agents, 2 different brokerages, 1 identical lie. That was not gossip anymore. It was a pipeline. That night, after Ellie went to bed, I pulled 5 years of county property records for Willow Creek Preserve. 21 homes had changed ownership, and 7 had sold well below their assessed market value. All 7 had been purchased by the same company, Cedar Crown Holdings, and everyone had been resold within 2 years for a profit of at least 30%. The registered manager of Cedar Crown was Warren Voss, Marlene's older brother. I sat there in the dark office, listening to the air conditioner cycle on and off, feeling that old professional calm settle over me. It was the feeling I used to get when scattered facts stopped being strange and started becoming evidence. The fines were pressure. The agents were the exit route. Cedar Crown was the buyer waiting at the bottom. Marlene was not trying to manage the neighborhood. She was forming it. 3 days later, she taped a notice to my front door demanding an interior safety inspection of my home. The HOA wanted access to every bedroom, the garage, and my office, supposedly to verify occupancy and structural compliance. I emailed her that the association had no right to enter my home and that any unauthorized access would be treated as trespassing. She replied within an hour, telling me resistance would only complicate my situation. Then she added one line that made me lean closer to the screen. She wrote, "A cooperative sale would be easier for everyone, especially your daughter." I read that sentence twice. Then I printed it, placed it in the Voss folder, and installed the first camera before sunset. By the end of that week, I had 6 cameras covering the exterior of the house, 2 inside the foyer, 1 pointed toward the garage workbench, and another mounted beneath the back porch where I could see anyone approaching Ellie's bedroom window. I did not advertise them. I did not put up one of those cheerful little signs warning trespassers to smile, and I did not mention the system to Marlene, because cameras are most useful when the person being recorded still believes the room belongs to them. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on Thursday morning at 6:12, my phone buzzed beside the bed. Motion detected, East Side Yard. I opened the feed and saw Marlene walking through the wet grass in white tennis shoes, carrying her leather binder under one arm and holding her phone against the window with the other. She moved slowly from room to room, photographing through the glass, pausing longest outside Ellie's bedroom. I was out of bed before I realized I had stood up. Every instinct in me wanted to throw open the back door and ask what kind of sick person photographed the child's room before sunrise. But anger is expensive when evidence is free, so I stayed behind the curtain and let the camera record her. She took 6 pictures, checked the side gate, then walked back toward the road as calmly as if she had been inspecting rose bushes. At breakfast, Ellie watched me stirring coffee I had forgotten to drink. She asked if Marlene had come back. I told her yes. She lowered her spoon and said, "Did she look in my window?" I hated that she already knew the answer. "She did," I said. Ellie stared at the table for a second, then asked whether we should close the curtains all day. That question landed harder than any threat Marlene had sent me. Because a child should not have to shrink her world because an adult with a title has decided boundaries are optional. I told Ellie she had done nothing wrong and that nobody was taking her room. The swing, or the house, she nodded. But that evening, she drew the red oak with a fence around it. I contacted an old colleague named Lorraine Maddox, Deputy Director of Enforcement at the Texas Real Estate Commission. Lorraine was the kind of woman who read every footnote before she shook your hand. And after 15 years of working adjacent fraud cases, I trusted her more than most people I had known twice as long. She drove down from Austin the next morning and sat at my kitchen table while I showed her the fines, the realtor visits, the county transfers, the shell company, Marlene's email, and the video from the bedroom window. Lorraine did not interrupt once. When the footage ended, she leaned back, folded her glasses, and said, "Cedar Crown has been on our radar for 18 months. I asked what they had. Discounted acquisitions in 3 counties, fast resales, repeated use of the same 6 agents, but no clean evidence showing who creates the pressure before the sale." She tapped Marlene's email with one finger. "This may be the bridge." That afternoon, Lorraine opened preliminary investigations into Calvin Rusk, Dana Pierce, and a third agent named Preston Hale. whose name appeared on 5 of the 7 suspicious sales. She also contacted the state banking department and requested a review of Cedar Crown's transaction history. Before leaving, she warned me not to confront Marlene, not to post anything online, and not to tell a single neighbor what we had found. People like this survive by controlling the story, she said. The minute she knows you have the paperwork, she starts destroying the paperwork. I promised to remain quiet. Marlene made that promise difficult. The following Monday, the HOA sent a hearing notice accusing me of running an unauthorized commercial operation from my home because I worked remotely 2 days a week. 2 days later, my homeowner's insurance company called about an anonymous report claiming I stored hazardous business records in the garage. Then someone complained to the county that my septic system was leaking into a drainage easement. A county inspector came out, walked the property, found nothing, and apologized for wasting my morning. I sent every letter and inspection report to Lorraine. Marlene was building a paper storm around the house, hoping enough official envelopes would make surrender feel like relief. Then she crossed the line that changed the temperature of the entire case. Ellie's school counselor called me during lunch and asked if I could come in. Someone had filed a report alleging Ellie was frequently left alone overnight while I traveled for work. Child Protective Services had interviewed her that morning. The claim had already been judged unsupported, but Ellie had spent 40 minutes in a small office explaining to strangers that her mother was dead and her father came home every night. I found her sitting outside the counselor's office with her sketchbook closed against her chest. She did not cry until we reached the truck. When she finally did, she asked why Marlene hated us. I told her I did not think Marlene hated us. I thought she wanted the house, and people who want something badly enough sometimes convince themselves the owner is the problem. Ellie wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and said, "That sounds like hate with paperwork." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny left in me. I called Lorraine from the school parking lot. She used CPS against my daughter. Lorraine was silent for several seconds. Then she said, "Do not contact her. I am driving down tonight." We met after dark on my back porch while Ellie slept inside. Lorraine brought a former Dallas detective named Vernon Pike, now an enforcement investigator, and they laid out what the banking review had uncovered. Cedar Crown Holdings had sent 21 transfers of $4,500 each into an account held jointly by Marlene and her husband, $94,500 over 4 years. 9 transfers occurred within 10 days of below-market closings inside Willow Creek Preserve. None were disclosed to the HOA membership. None were listed as compensation. Marlene held no real estate license, which meant she had no legal right to receive referral fees from property transactions. Lorraine slid the summary across the patio table and said, "Your neighborhood president has been paid every time one of her neighbors sells cheap." I looked toward Ellie's dark bedroom window and felt something inside me settle. Until then, part of me had still been reacting as a homeowner, angry and protective and tired. In that moment, the investigator in me took over completely. "What do you need?" I asked. Lorraine said they could suspend the agents, refer Cedar Crown for prosecution, and open a civil enforcement case against Marlene. But the strongest possible evidence would be direct proof that she knowingly entered a home she did not own and presented it to licensed agents without authorization. "She has gotten away with this because every frightened owner eventually signs something," Lorraine said. "She creates the consent after the pressure." I looked at the copy of her email telling me cooperation would be easier for my daughter. Then we give her a house where the owner signs nothing. Over the next 2 weeks, we built the operation carefully. Vernon mapped camera angles in the foyer and living room. A county sheriff's sergeant named Owen Barrett reviewed the trespass evidence and agreed to position deputies nearby if Marlene entered using an unauthorized key. Assistant District Attorney Celia Monroe accepted the referral involving the false child welfare report and told me she wanted every original file, every timestamp, and every message preserved. I also learned how Marlene had likely obtained a key. The previous year, the HOA had sent a locksmith and irrigation contractor to inspect what they claimed was a shared water control in my garage. There was no shared control. My garage camera archive showed the locksmith pressing my house key into a portable duplicating machine while I was outside speaking with the contractor. That single frame made Vernon whistle softly. "She has been planning the entry longer than you thought." The hardest part was keeping Ellie out of the middle. I arranged for her to spend a weekend with Rebecca's brother, Sam, in Waco. I told her enough to keep her from feeling lied to, but not enough to make her afraid. She hugged me before leaving and whispered, Please do not let her sit on Mom's swing. I promised she would never touch it. Then I emailed Marlene and told her I had begun reconsidering the property. I said the fines, inspections, and demands had become difficult to manage, and perhaps a quiet sale would be best for Ellie. The reply came in 37 minutes. Marlene wrote that she was relieved I had finally become reasonable, then offered to arrange a private walkthrough with 3 trusted agents before I made any public decision. She suggested Saturday at 2 and recommended that I be away so the agents could evaluate the home without emotional interference. I told her I would be visiting family in Waco. Her final message said, "Excellent. Leave everything to me." On Saturday morning, I dusted the mantel, made a fresh pot of coffee, and placed Rebecca's favorite yellow roses in a vase by the window. At 1:45, Lorraine and Vernon parked in an unmarked SUV across the street. The deputies waited around the corner. I sat in the leather chair with the deed on the table and 4 labeled folders beside it. At 1:58, Arlene's white Mercedes turned onto the road, followed by 3 other cars. She stepped out smiling, gathered the agents in my driveway, and pointed toward my house as if she had built it herself. Then she walked onto my porch, reached into her purse, and pulled out a silver key. She slid the key into my deadbolt and turned it like she had done it 100 times before, then pushed the door open and called over her shoulder, "Come on in. The owner has given me full authorization." Calvin Russ entered first, followed by Dana Pierce and Preston Hale, while Marlene walked ahead of them with that leather binder tucked against her hip, pointing toward the kitchen and describing my floor plan as if she had built the place herself. "He is in Waco with family," she said. "We have plenty of time, and Cedar Crown can close before the end of the month." Then they rounded the corner into the living room and saw me sitting beside the yellow roses with a cup of black coffee in my hand. Calvin stopped so quickly, Dana nearly walked into his back. Preston took 1 step toward the door. Marlene's smile remained in place for a second longer than the rest of her face, then slowly collapsed. "Good afternoon," I said. "Please come in. You have already gone this far." Marlene recovered first, because people like her always mistake quick talking for control. "Grant, there has clearly been a scheduling misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said. "You told them I was in Waco, used a stolen copy of my key, and entered a house that has never been listed for sale." She lifted her chin and tightened her grip on the binder. "I am here in my official capacity as president of Willow Creek Preserve. That title gives you authority over mailbox paint and lawn height." "Marlene, not my front door." Nobody laughed, although Vernon later told me he almost did. I asked all 4 of them to sit down. Calvin and Dana moved toward the couch immediately. Preston stayed near the foyer until I looked at him and said, "Mr. L, the deputies outside would prefer that nobody leave yet." That was not technically an order, but it worked like one. Marlene stared through the front window and finally noticed the dark SUV across the street. She sat in the chair opposite mine, crossing one leg over the other as though we were about to negotiate. I placed 3 folders on the coffee table and slid 1 toward each agent. Inside were copies of my deed, screenshots of Marlene's emails, their recorded visits, and the transaction summary showing Cedar Crown's payments to the Voss account. Calvin opened his folder and went pale. Dana turned 3 pages, stopped, then whispered, "Oh my God." Preston read the bank transfer schedule twice before looking directly at Marlene. "You said he had agreed to sell." Marlene did not turn toward him. He indicated a willingness to cooperate. "No," I said. "I indicated that I was reconsidering the property. I never authorized a listing, a showing, or an entry." Preston's voice grew quieter, which somehow made it sharper. "You told me you had written approval." Marlene finally looked at him. "Do not say another word without counsel." Preston gave a small, humorless laugh. "That advice would have been useful before you walked us into a felony." I reached for the 4th folder and set it in front of Marlene. Her name was printed across the cover. She did not touch it. "Open it," I said. "You have spent months reading documents you sent to me. It is only fair you read one I prepared for you." The first page was the garage camera image of the locksmith copying my key. The second was a timeline of every unsupported fine she had issued. The third showed her outside Ellie's bedroom window at 6:12 in the morning. The fourth listed every payment from Cedar Crown. The final page contained the child welfare complaint, along with school records confirming it had been dismissed as false. Her eyes stayed on that final page. "You cannot prove I filed this," she said. The account used to submit it was linked to your HOA email address, I replied. The login came from your home internet connection, and the draft was saved on the association's cloud server. That last detail came from Lorraine's investigators, and it was the one that finally drained the color from Marlene's face. She glanced toward the door. I sent a single text from the phone resting beside my coffee. "Come in!" A moment later, footsteps crossed the porch. Sergeant Owen Barrett entered first with 2 deputies behind him, followed by Lorraine Maddox, Vernon Pike, and Assistant District Attorney Celia Monroe. Lorraine walked into the living room holding a black portfolio and addressed the agents before Marlene could speak. She informed Calvin, Dana, and Preston that their real estate licenses were being placed under emergency administrative suspension pending formal hearings. Preston surrendered his card immediately. Dana began crying quietly. Calvin asked whether cooperating would matter, and Lorraine told him that honesty generally matters most when offered before a subpoena. But it was not too late to begin. Then Sergeant Barrett stepped in front of Marlene. He said her full name, asked her to stand, and informed her that she was being arrested for criminal trespass, unlawful duplication and use of a residential key, filing a false child welfare report, and conspiracy connected to fraudulent real estate transactions. Marlene looked at me as if I had broken some private rule between us. "You planned this." "I prepared for it," I said. "You planned everything else." She stood slowly. The binder slipped from her lap and struck the floor, spilling violation notices across my rug. There was something fitting about that. All those official-looking papers scattered around her shoes, suddenly no more powerful than grocery receipts. Sergeant Barrett escorted her onto the porch and placed her in handcuffs beneath the red oak. She looked toward the swing once, maybe because it was moving in the afternoon breeze, and for a second I remembered Ellie asking me not to let Marlene touch it. She never did. The state investigation widened within days. 11 Willow Creek homeowners came forward with similar stories involving manufactured fines, insurance complaints, sudden inspections, and agents offering fast cash sales. Cedar Crown Holdings was charged in a multi-county fraud case. Warren Voss later pleaded guilty to conspiracy and unlawful compensation schemes. Calvin and Dana lost their licenses permanently after investigators found undisclosed payments. Preston cooperated, testified against the others, and received a 3-year suspension before leaving the business. Marlene was convicted on multiple fraud counts and the false report involving Ellie. She served 28 months in state custody and was permanently barred from serving on any homeowners association board in Texas. The HOA was reorganized under court supervision. The new board asked me to become president, but I declined. I had spent enough of my life watching titles make ordinary people feel taller than they were. Instead, I agreed to lead a homeowner review committee that required every proposed fine to cite the exact covenant being enforced. Funny thing happened after that. The neighborhood did not collapse. Lawns were still mowed, dues were still paid, and nobody needed to photograph a child's bedroom to keep property values stable. Ellie and I stayed in the house. She is 16 now, and the red oak swing is still there, though her feet nearly touch the ground when she sits on it. Sometimes I watch her sketch beneath that tree and think about how close we came to letting someone else turn our grief into an opportunity. Marlene believed a widower with a quiet daughter would be easy to pressure, and maybe that was her biggest mistake. Quiet is not the same as weak. Grief is not surrender. And a homeowners association is not a deed. No matter how impressive the binder looks, what would you have done in my place? Confronted her the first time she crossed the yard? Or stayed quiet until she unlocked the door herself? Tell me in the comments who you think crossed the worst line. Marlene, the agents who never verified the owner's consent, or the neighbors who stayed silent because her scheme had not reached their house yet. Share this story with anyone who thinks an HOA cannot go too far. And subscribe, because the next story begins with a retired nurse, a row of protected oak trees, and a board president who learned too late that a chainsaw can destroy evidence in both directions.